Welcome back to today's video. Today is Sunday, October 19th, 2025, and today we are going to be taking a look at the state of Virginia in the 2025 election set to take place in just about 2 weeks from today, about 16 days marked between now and Election Day in 2025, and a lot to really unpack as we get into the final stages of the 2025 cycle and look to Virginia as a state that borders the nation's capital and stands to be one of the few states where we are likely going to see massive pushback against the Republican Party and Donald Trump's administration. What we are going to see here in the 2025 level is what we are starting to get in terms of results as we find a new controversy surrounding the Attorney General's race with leaked text messages that show very bad messages from the Attorney General Democratic candidate, Jay Jones, all the way over to the governor's race that does not seem to be getting any better for Winsome Sears since the first debate. There's a second one planned to take place in the state of Virginia. We'll wait and see exactly what that debate ends up following through on, but chances are early voting has already opened. People have cast their ballots. You've seen some of these counties, in fact, have reached early voting numbers of 50% of the last presidential cycle. We are expecting massive turnout in Virginia, a lot to see here, a lot to unpack, but we haven't had any real substantive data since the text message leaks that happened in the 11th hour of the election, leaked in just a day after we made the video with Chaz Nuttycombe from State Navigate. They are the ones that do the Virginia forecasts in the House of Delegates races that they got 100% right in 2023. They're now doing the governor's race, lieutenant governor's race, attorney general's race. A lot to unpack there as well. We can talk about that a little bit later in the video, but literally the day after we made this video doing a 1-month outlook on the election cycle, what we saw was that a huge controversy came about for Jay Jones. And so since then, we've seen a lot of Democrats really disavow what Jay Jones had said over text message. A lot of people, rightfully so, calling out the text messages that they find to be, completely abhorrent coming from a Democratic nominee. Now, the ultimate question is, given that a lot of voters have already made up their minds about how they want to vote in Virginia, we have completely thrown out any consideration around the governor's race, the lieutenant governor's race, of being competitive. It has all come down to, do Democrats get the trifecta in the race here? Not actually in terms of control, but they would actually get that with the House of Delegates. But the point is that would they win 3 out of the 3 races in the state of Virginia? And the Attorney General's race, actually, to be quite honest with you, in the lead up to, such an insane scandal to be released about Jay Jones, was already in a position where it was expected to be quite competitive, right? Jay Jones had been underperforming consistently compared to where Abigail Spanberger was in poll after poll. In the times where Spanberger would be up 10, he would be up 5. When she would be up 6, he would be up 1, right? When she would be up 9, he would be up 3. And so there was a consistent drawback here. And I think a big reason for that is that oftentimes Republicans tend to do better in races that have to do with the state treasury and attorney general races, because generally speaking, the average American voter might trust Democrats more on health care, might trust Democrats more in this case right now with the tariffs, on the economy, but on some of these more hot button issues, especially ones that feel a bit more localized, especially in a statewide race on issues like crime and law and order, it is typically Republicans who do get that upper hand. The Police Benevolent Association, which endorsed Abigail Spanberger for governor on the Democratic ticket, endorsed Jason Miyares, the incumbent Republican Attorney General, in the Attorney General's race. So really, there are some pretty big differences there. But since the scandal has come about, what the data is telling us is that Democrats can pretty much be rest assured about the governor's race. Not obviously, right? They still need to turn out and vote, and the margin at which they win by will really be indicative of what we might expect in the later elections of 2026 and 2027, and of course, the 2028 race. But what we find here is that Abigail Spanberger maintains that dominance with a 10-point lead over Winsome Sears in this race, 51-41, and a 23-point advantage amongst independents. In the lieutenant governor's race with Ghazala Hashmi, she's coming from the state legislature. Now she's running for lieutenant governor. She's the Democratic nominee, running against radio host John Reed, who actually is the Republican Party's first ever openly gay nominee for lieutenant governor in the country, and also one of the only times we've ever seen an openly gay candidate run on the ticket in the state of Virginia. The reason I point that out is because Winsome Sears recently received, and is continuing to receive, an onslaught of attacks from the Democratic Party after she said on the debate stage that firing an employee because they were gay is not discrimination. And it wasn't that it was just a mess up or a Freudian slip where she walked it back. She doubled and tripled down on it, and the campaign has not even issued an apology or reversal in sentiment, because ultimately that is what Winsome Sears believes. She has a history of being outspoken against, LGBT Americans. And so what we know is that Winsome Sears, who has this history, does not like to be campaigning alongside John Reed, does not like to be in this position where she's even on the ticket, in theory, with a gay man. And I think it has been quite interesting because what that has resulted in is a lack of coordinated messaging all around. The Virginia GOP is fluctuating the way they're going about it. Abigail Spanberger maintains this 10-point lead because Winsome Sears is an exceptionally bad candidate. And John Reed is too. He has his own fair share of scandals that have come about. No one's really talking about it because everyone knows that his race is practically cooked here. Ghazala Hashmi likely going to be the next lieutenant governor from the state of Virginia. The real consideration for voters is not the governor's race, not the lieutenant governor's race, but rather the attorney general's race. As I said, since the scandal of Jay Jones's leaked text messages, 51% of voters have said that Jay Jones should withdraw from the race. This is a state that Kamala Harris received 52% of the vote in the last cycle. And in 2020, the state of Virginia went to the Democratic Party by 10.1%, and Biden got 54% of the vote. Donald Trump's numbers were at 44%. Virginia voted more for the Democrats in 2020 than Texas did for the Republicans. Think about that, right? And think about where it is now. Kamala Harris still won the state, but only by 6. And other states got significantly redder. But that speaks to the problem that Jay Jones faces, because if 51% of voters here are saying he should withdraw from the race, there's a huge section of Democrats. The one saving grace here, to some degree, for the Democratic Party, as you see them as this collective unit, is that it does not seem that Jay Jones is bringing down Democrats across the ballot. Winsome Sears has tried tirelessly to, and so has John Reed, to attach their opponents on the Democratic side to the Jay Jones scandal, but it isn't really landing. And when we talk about the lack of coordinated messaging, think about this, for instance. Jason Miyares is outspending Jay Jones in this race about 4-1. In the governor's race, though, Abigail Spanberger is outspending Winsome Sears about 10-1. But in that one of the ratio of the 11, total, Winsome Sears is spending a lot of her money in the final stretch of this campaign saying that Abigail Spanberger refuses to unendorse Jay Jones and is silent about the leaked text messages. However, and this is the coordinated messaging part, the running mate, essentially, on this ticket, Jason Miyares, is reading the writing on the wall that Spanberger is going to win this race, and now is putting advertisements up with his money. He's actually raised nearly as much as Winsome Sears, spending the same amount going after Jay Jones, not by saying that, the Democrats won't disavow him, by saying the Democrats do disavow him. They are putting up ads saying Spanberger, even she, is going so far and extreme and essentially saying, don't vote for Jay Jones. There's no coordinated messaging on this, and it all becomes nullified. But there is an impact of this scandal, and this is the close race to watch. In terms of direct impact on the House of Delegates race and the governor and lieutenant governor's race, we haven't seen it. But as it comes down to the attorney general's race, absolutely. And only now are we starting to see that, the chance at which Miyares is getting up and up and up on the day the scandal dropped was less than 10%. And now it's getting closer. And I will say this, what State Navigate talked about too in the video, Chaz Nuttycombe said it when we had him on the channel just 2 weeks ago, was that the numbers here are indicative of where it stands today, right? Meaning that it also takes time for the model to adjust. And this is the first real and substantive poll we've seen since the scandal, besides Trafalgar and Signal, both of them Republican internals. And in some cases, the polling dating, started asking the questions before the scandal had been released. So giving this time to really level in, you're finding that all of the polls thus far have been Republican internals. But as it comes down to this most recent one, Kaplan Strategies typically overestimates Democratic support. In the last election, sure, they got their margins spot on, but typically speaking, overestimate the amount of Democratic support by roughly by 1.34%. So if they're saying that Jason Miyares, the Republican, is leading, chances are he's up 2 to 3 points. But it is this 45-44 that is really taking me for a spin, right? As 51% of voters say Jay Jones should withdraw, I'm sure there's some Democrats there that will quietly vote for Jay Jones, but not oppose him. And when it comes down to this, might say, he needs to withdraw from the race, but he's still better than a Republican. That could be the way that we would find some Democrats rationalizing this choice, because there has been a conversation on the national level, and I'm sure in many Democratic households, about the pearl clutching of the party. If you don't know what I mean, essentially, it is this idea that the Democratic Party holds their own far more responsible than anything Republicans would even consider keeping into account when it comes down to who they vote for on their side of the aisle, right? Donald Trump, and this is the talking points of the Democrats too, making that case, not necessarily in favor of Jay Jones, but generally speaking, right? Think about 2004. Oh, it feels like a long way away. It was 2 years after I was born, yada, 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 whatever, and I don't remember this. But people talk a lot about Howard Dean. They talk a lot about, him being in that position, running for office, and then it was a scream that changed everything. Now, obviously, that seems insane, that in a presidential election, everything can go awry because voters found you slightly uncanny, and it was an ad that was uplifted. A scream. That in 2009 and in 2010, the biggest news of the day was that Obama wore a tan suit, and that the color tan was not fitting for the severity of the moment when he briefed the press. We are in an entirely new day and age in politics, where now today you have a president of the United States who is a 34 times count convicted felon, whether you agree with the case or not. It is true. And voters evidently did not keep that in consideration more than, I think, what many of these voters did care about more, right? The state of the economy, they cared about that more. They cared about the state of the southern border crisis, as it was put. The Donald Trump talking points were quite effective, but what it also did, since 2016 onward, was raised this fundamental question within the Democratic Party that is it worth holding Democratic candidates to a standard that might have been and might have existed under Obama, Kerry, Gore, Clinton, that may serve to their detriment should they hold them accountable today. We've seen it with the conversation. The most recent one I think that comes to mind is this push and pull between voters in Maine about Graham Plattner's comments. You've seen some Democrats very publicly, including Representative Ro Khanna, and now today on CNN, DNC Chair Ken Martin, making the case that Plattner's comments from 2013 are not indicative of the man he is today in 2025. And it feels like there's all these random things I'm bringing up, but seriously speaking, I think it brings it back to this same conversation that is likely being had in the households of many of these Democratic voters in Virginia, that sure, I do think, adamantly believe that these comments are wrong. I think everyone can agree the comments are wrong. But the question is, will voters vote on it as a make or break for the Attorney General's race? And an entirely separate point of calculus is that this scandal might have gotten to national attention, but it doesn't necessarily mean every single voter is paying attention to what you see in CNN and Fox News and MSNBC. Very seriously, this election in 2025 could find a lot of Democrats who simply turn out not because they're excited about X, Y, and Z candidate or in opposition to ABC candidate. It could just be that they are upset with Donald Trump and they're going to vote blue down ballot no matter what. They might not even be able to name their sitting congressman, but their vote counts just as much as you who is watching this video. And that's the way the American political system works. And in terms of notable scandal, sure, this has been the biggest thing, but it is ultimately the Attorney General's race, which will rank third on the ballot. And the governor's race and lieutenant governor's race is outspending and outpacing advertisements, social media, on-the-ground movements, than the Attorney General's race. And it will be interesting, I do believe, that this is the race that could be costly for the Democratic Party. But I adamantly believe there will be no impact on the governor's race, lieutenant governor's race, House of Delegates race. This Attorney General's race will serve to be in its own bubble that maybe Republicans might be able to pull through on. But there's no guarantee that happens, because I do think there could be a quiet section of voters who will not tell a pollster and will not tell anyone that they think that this response might be published anywhere, that they could convincingly tell themselves and the respondents that they were saying Jay Jones to drop out of the race, and yet in the next question they were voting for him. Because that's not how it works. That's the missed Trump vote we saw in 16, 20, and 24, where voters would not admit they were voting for the president of the United States, but they ultimately were. And that's what I think we might be missing here. Now, it could just be that this support is lost, but I find the 51 to 45 number quite interesting, given that a lot of these voters were, not super on board with Jason Miyares, but were in the majority on board in saying Jay Jones should not be in the race. Because in Virginia, you have two options and none others. And so it would be interesting to see exactly what ends up happening in the Attorney General's race. All to say, we're 2 weeks out, and the Democrats still maintain dominance in every other aspect of the race, save the Attorney General's race. It'll be interesting, and it will be one worth watching and one worth investing a lot of time and understanding, because it could be indicative of, if Democrats win the race, an end of an era of Democratic politics, of this idea that politicians should be punished in the way they had been through electoral means, because it seems as if a lot of Democrats have come to the opinion that Republicans never punish their own on circumstances like this. Even in the case of the January 6th insurrection, 3 years later, Donald Trump is the Republican nominee for president. And so these are things that, I think a lot of Democrats have felt, maybe the term isn't necessarily radicalized, but very much emboldened in their belief that the set of standards are different for the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. And that's the way that it might be thinking in terms of calculus here, because I think that is the only way I can really understand and rationalize these data points as, okay, this could explain it, because not much else does. Virginia is a blue state. The question is it blue enough for the Attorney General's race to go blue as every other part of the state does, or does it actually split the ticket, as Kaplan strategies might suggest, with no clear directive on either side of the aisle? The Attorney General's race is a toss-up, but everything else nearly safe for the Democratic Party. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video for you to watch, and then a playlist for my 2026-25 election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.